Data binding, part of Android Jetpack, is becoming an important part of an Android developer's toolkit. Now, back in 2015, we introduced data binding, and I saw my first data binding expression, and I was like, expressions in XML, that's crazy talk. But I've grown to appreciate what we've done with data binding, and the best thing about it is you can use as little or as much as you want. Now, the first thing that binding gives you, as a side effect, is eliminating ever having to use find view by ID. First, we need to enable data binding by setting data binding enabled equals true in the app.gradle file. Then we convert a layout to a data binding layout by wrapping the layout in a layout tag. You can do this automatically in Android Studio by clicking on the light bulb and selecting Convert to Data Binding Layout. You get a binding object after inflating the layout with data binding util that contains references to all of the views with IDs to populate your views, but you'll rarely use it because you'll want to actually use data binding. We first have to make data we want to bind available to our layout by declaring variables in the data element of our layout XML. And then we can use binding expressions in layout XML attributes to tie that data to views. Expressions are wrapped with curly braces and prefixed by an @ sign. Here are some examples of layout expressions in a text view. In the first one, we're assigning the text property to a view model property. In the second one, we are using a custom attribute, height of 0. In the third one, we're using a lambda, which gets passed to the text view and calls onLike. And in the fourth one, we're using a lambda, which calls onLike with the text property of another view. Now, to give data binding access to the view model instance, we just set it in the binding object after inflating the layout. All of this works due to the power of built-in binding adapters. And since data binding is open source, they're a great resource for building your own custom binding adapters. All right. Custom Binding Adapters 101. The adapter is annotated with @bindingAdapter and takes one or more attribute names. The adapter method takes a view as the first parameter. Use a subclass of view to restrict it to a specific view type. Any additional parameters are then matched with the data type in the binding expressions, because binding adapters can differ just by data types. You can also override the behavior of standard attributes. And binding adapters are module global, so be careful of creating unintended side effects. Also, data binding is now integrated with LiveData. So if you've defined a LiveData like this, by setting the Lifecycle Owner to the appropriate fragment or activity, any expression containing the LiveData will automatically observe it and reflect any changes to it. You can even use two-way data binding with LiveData. Just make your variable available to data binding, have a mutable LiveData property, and use @equals when defining your binding expression to indicate two-way binding. Now, whenever the LiveData is updated in code, the checkbox will be updated. And whenever the checkbox is clicked, the LiveData will be updated. We've got some great resources for learning data binding linked to this video in the description. Check out the Data Binding Code Lab to learn about some of the other great things data binding offers.